This next question is a complicated question, and I'm just going to read it through because there's a number of facets to this. Sometimes it's curious to me what a question reveals in the way that it's asked. Okay, here it is. How is it fair for God to, before the foundations of the world, and so not due to any actions of their own, choose the people who would be saved and others who would be condemned, not on the basis of their actions, since they hadn't committed any actions yet? Well, the first thing that caught my eye is the word fair. I think any discussions of fairness in terms of the nature of God are most of the time inappropriate. That is, God is not obliged to be fair. I think the virtue that we ought to be discussing in these kind of circumstances is justice, not fairness. Because fairness, it seems, requires that all people be treated the same. I see no obligation that God, the creator of the universe, has to treat all people the same. Whatever you get out of Romans 9, this has got to be one of the lessons. God can do what he wants with that which is his. Now, what he can't do is he can't violate the dictates of justice. That's a separate issue. Fairness is not a requirement. So the first part of my response is, if you continue to think about God being fair, you're going to run into all kinds of problems. Because the Bible is thick with God playing favorites in a certain fashion. That is, God makes his own decisions for his own reasons. Maybe playing favorites isn't the right phrase. Maybe I should put it this way. The Bible is thick with God not treating everybody exactly the same. All right? That's his prerogative. That's my claim. Here's the second thing. There is a claim that God here in election is in view, that he chooses the people who would be saved and he chooses others who would be condemned, and not on the basis of their actions. I want to draw a distinction here because there's an ambiguity in the question, and I'm not sure what this person is implying here. But there is a view called double predestination, in which God makes a choice to condemn people and makes a choice to save people. So he's got a group of people. He says, these people I'm going to condemn, these people I'm going to save. That's called double predestination. It's not my view, and it is not a necessary part of the idea of election, as long as you understand that it is the case that if God chooses to save some and not to save the others do get condemned. But the motif is a little bit different. You have to keep in mind the biblical teaching that all human beings on the earth are under God's judgment in virtue of their rebellion. Not only the inherited rebellion that they have from Adam, Romans 5, but also their own acts of rebellion that they are then guilty for before God. So everyone is guilty. If God did nothing, everyone would already be under judgment. So God's choice to judge is in virtue of his justice, not because he just wants to throw a bunch of people in hell. Oh, I'm going to find let's throw him in hell. Okay, who's left? Okay, we'll take them to heaven. Isn't the way it works. All those who go to hell take that trip justly, and there's no obligation for God to give them an opportunity to be rescued from that, an opportunity for pardon or clemency. It's not required of God to do that. So he doesn't, in my view, he doesn't just look at the whole world and then decree some to go to hell and some to go to heaven, and then decrees the means to accomplish that, which is the fall and the cross. I don't think that's the way it works. Though some do. It's not my view. So those two don't necessarily go together. However, those who are not given grace do have to stand with their own crimes against God, but they are guilty in virtue of their sin. They're not guilty in virtue of the fact that they weren't chosen. Imagine a criminal who's going to prison who's saying, the only reason I'm here is because I didn't get a pardon. Now, if I'd gotten a pardon, I'd be out. Well, which is true enough, but that's not why he was there. He's there because he's committed crimes against the state, and that's what got him there. And by the same token, those who are in hell, as Paul says in Romans 1 and the beginning of Romans 2, will be without excuse. There is no excuse. They're all guilty. Okay. One last thing here, And that has to do with, really, I think, the heart of the question, that has to do with the idea that God is condemning people and saving people from a point temporally, I got to be careful I say this, temporally prior to when this person lives, and therefore any of their actions might be judged good or bad. And so how could he condemn people to hell before they even did anything wrong? Whatever his fixed will of condemnation is towards people who never receive the grace of Christ, it's in virtue of things that they are going to do. That they haven't committed them yet is utterly irrelevant. God's omniscience secures the fact of these free will acts of rebellion happening in the future. His knowledge doesn't cause it to happen. No, they hadn't done it yet. But you could be watching you could have a sting operation, all right? I mean, to find a parallel, and you're setting up a situation where this guy is going to get caught in the act. Well, let's just say you know for certain that it's all going to pan out the way you plan it to pan out, and then when the act is committed, the guy is judged. And you're planning to judge him when he does it. That's exactly the same situation here, at least as the relevant issues. And that is, God knows in advance what's going to happen, and that person becomes guilty when it happens, and God has a fixed disposition to let the guilt stand when the person commits the crime, for those who are not given his grace, and for those who are given a sovereign gift of free grace. Then God has arranged a substitute payment for that particular crime, and that's the forgiveness. Therefore, the forgiveness of our sins is secured from history past, even before we committed any sins, because God's omniscience, his knowledge of the future, is perfect. By the way, whether he's in time or out of time makes no difference on this particular issue. That's one way of explaining how he knows something in advance. He can see down line the quarter of time or whatever. That's unrelated really to the ultimate answer. All you need is God's omniscience here, and if God knows it's going to happen, he can plan what he's going to do when it happens any way he wants. There's nothing unfair about that, and there's nothing unjust about that. And that's the real issue.